Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. On the day of my wedding, Adrian was in a car accident that injured his hands, a critical setback for a pianist. Later, I suffered a severe beating that left me bleeding and even resulted in disability due to the torture. As I was nearing death, my fiancée called me. She said Adrian was afraid of the dark and wouldn't return. I told her I was dying, but she hung up without hesitation. Upon opening my eyes again, I decided to leave. I was reborn at the moment he punched me in the middle of the street. The punch that sent me to the ground confirmed this wasn't a dream. It was the moment he insulted me in front of a crowd. People quickly gathered, wondering why there was a fight. Could it be an affair? They speculated, given his good looks but poor morals. The crowd buzzed with excitement, a smirk evident in Adrian's provocative eyes. He had always been crazy like this, humiliating me everywhere, but I always endured. But now that he had ended up like this, both Evelyn and I were directly responsible. But this time I wouldn't endure it anymore because I knew all the truths. Evelyn rushed over eagerly to help me and saw a familiar face that seemed like a dream from a past life. She had always sided with Adrian, blaming me. "Endure it, you won't die anyway," she would say. But ultimately I really had died. With this in mind, a mocking light flashed in my eyes as I casually brushed her off and then pushed Adrian to the ground. Something seemed off with his face, but I had no intention of stopping. I grabbed his collar and punched him hard. He groaned, then looked at me with eyes full of hatred before I struck again, his face twisting in pain. But I laughed loudly, satisfied, and taunted him by saying, "I've wanted to hit you like this for a long time." Just as I was about to throw a third punch, Evelyn grabbed my arm and said, "Enough, Lucas. What are you doing to a patient?" Evelyn pushed me away and helped Adrian up, his gaze filled with resentment towards me. "Lucas, how can you be so villainous? Don't you know he is a patient?" I chuckled lightly, removed my diamond ring, and threw it in front of her. "Evelyn, I'll see you at the Civil Affairs office at 9 a.m. tomorrow for a divorce." The crowd around us was stunned, and Evelyn staggered, overwhelmed. Without wasting any more time or words, I turned and walked away, never looking back. If I hadn't been hurt so much, I wouldn't have become so indifferent. Evelyn, Adrian, and I were neighbors as children, and we all had a joyful time together before Evelyn's family moved away. We lost contact, but we met again in college. At that time, Adrian was studying abroad, and when he found out, he joked about wanting to be the best man at our wedding. So I never thought he also liked Evelyn. On the day Evelyn and I got married, I forgot to bring the wedding wine. Adrian drove back to get it and then had the accident. His blood-soaked body was rushed to the hospital in a coma. He kept calling for Evelyn. We both heard it and took turns visiting him in the hospital. His hands were broken in the accident. A pianist's most important assets are his hands, and he became agitated whenever he saw me, giving me looks filled with bitter hatred. Evelyn, in her agony, blamed me with tears in her eyes, saying, "You will never be able to make it up to him. If it weren't for you forgetting the wine, if you hadn't sent him back, he wouldn't have ended up like this." Thus, I endured Adrian's madness time and again while Evelyn defended him no matter what he said or did. Perhaps when Evelyn realized that Adrian liked her, everything changed. She spent most of her time at Adrian's house, treating it as if they were a married couple. But what could I say? I couldn't say anything because I was indirectly responsible for his condition. I didn't have the right to object. Previously, Adrian had hit me and insulted me in public numerous times, yet Evelyn always sided with him. Even on her birthday, I had prepared a romantic dinner at home to surprise her. I waited until midnight, my face shifting from excitement to loneliness. My eyes drifted from the dinner table to the piano and finally to the door until I heard the doorbell ring. Excited, I thought Evelyn had returned without any suspicion, but when I opened the door, I was ambushed by several men who gagged me, shut the door forcefully, and stomped on my hands, breaking them one by one. I tried to resist, but I couldn't. Eventually, I was beaten until my hands and legs were broken. As I lay dying, Evelyn called me. I thought she would save me, so I tried to answer the phone, but before I could speak, I heard her voice saying that Adrian was afraid of the dark and loneliness, so she wouldn't come back tonight. All the surprises I had prepared for her were just a joke compared to a mundane statement from Adrian. She didn't return. He was afraid of the dark. A smirk crossed my lips and tears fell from my eyes, but I was dying. I really was dying. Evelyn, can you not be like this? He is like this because of us. Don't play such games anymore, I said. She hung up decisively, and with the phone turning off, my life also ended. I thought if I could do it over, I would definitely stay away from them. After my death, my soul drifted back to Adrian's home. I saw him clinging to Evelyn's hand with a hint of panic in his eyes. Are you leaving, Evelyn? I'm afraid of the dark, he said. Evelyn put down her phone, patted his back and said, Go to sleep. After you sleep, you won't be afraid anymore. Don't leave me. Don't abandon me, he pleaded as he moved to kiss her. Evelyn pushed him away, stating firmly that she was married and looked very serious. If you looked closely, you could see a hint of anger. Adrian's eyes turned red and he pleaded, If that day you hadn't forgotten the stuff and hadn't remembered to go back for it, I wouldn't have ended up like this. Evelyn said she would take the blame for him, that she would treat him well, and she had also said as long as he didn't do anything too outrageous, she would accept everything. His words sounded sincere. Evelyn was stunned for a moment but seemed persuaded, and she let Adrian kiss her until it ended. Then she initiated a deeper kiss. The scene before me was nauseating, their movements all too skilled. I didn't know how many times they had done this behind my back. I was just a joke to them. After Evelyn fell asleep, I saw Adrian sneaking out to the dark balcony. Unfazed by the darkness, he made a phone call. I couldn't hear what the other person said, but he spoke angrily. Wasn't I just supposed to make him how did you guys end up killing him? I was foolish to trust you guys once again. Last time I asked you to pretend it was a car accident, and you fools almost killed me, making my hands useless. Damn it. He was so angry he almost threw his phone but feared Evelyn might notice. I floated beside him, looking at him coldly. It turned out all this was his own doing. After my death, Adrian had bought a plane ticket and was preparing to flee abroad. Unfortunately, he was arrested by the police just as he reached the airport, and the woman who reported him was also there. I couldn't see her face clearly, but she felt familiar. Yet I knew it wasn't Evelyn. I wanted to get closer to her to see who she was when suddenly everything went dark. I was reborn, and just moments after the street incident, my phone rang. It was Evelyn. She said, No, I don't agree with the divorce. You're still angry. Calm down first. Let's talk again. Before I could reply, a car rushed towards me. I instinctively dodged it, and before I could approach the car to confront the driver, the woman from the airport emerged with her charming face. She smiled at me, urging me to get into the car. I hadn't hung up yet, and Evelyn, overhearing the voice of Elaine, asked, Lucas, are you with Elaine now? How do you know her? I hung up immediately. Evelyn sent me a message warning me to stay away from Elaine, claiming she was not a good person. Elaine, the youngest child of the Weeb family, was quite open-minded and not close to Evelyn. Evelyn feared her. Elaine had been doing business abroad right after university, but suddenly returned home this year. Apparently, when Evelyn and I got married, I heard from Evelyn that her business had failed. My thoughts were interrupted by Elaine's voice. Does your face hurt? I unconsciously touched my face. It's nothing, I'm fine, I tried to say. I wanted to say something more. Since being reborn, my life was filled with resentment, but being a man, a small wound on the face didn't matter much. Elaine laughed softly, still trying to appear strong, and insisted on taking me to the hospital despite my refusals. She was adamant about driving me there. At the hospital, they arranged a full body checkup for me. After it ended, I saw her talking on the phone. Thanks for today. Go ahead if you have other things to do, she said, not planning to go home. I had never actually met her even after coming back. Evelyn said she was difficult to approach, so they rarely spoke to each other. Now that I had met her, she wasn't bad at all. She even took me to the hospital. Elaine hung up the phone and looked at me. Are you planning to divorce Evelyn? It seemed she had witnessed the entire incident. I nodded. I'll find a lawyer for you, don't worry. She leaned against the front door, appearing indifferent, wanting to talk, but seeing my slightly annoyed expression, she asked, Are you hurt? Let me get some water. Without waiting for my reaction, she stepped out. I heard her footsteps follow her, but I hadn't gone far when I ran into Evelyn. Evelyn was supporting Adrian, and when she saw me, she shouted. I was too apathetic to care about them and walked straight into another room. After a while, Elaine still hadn't returned. I was about to call her to see if anything had happened when Evelyn came up and burst through the door, accusing me directly. Lucas, the blow you gave Adrian today has left him blind. You are responsible for compensating him. Seeing her worry and panic, I coldly replied, Is that really related to me? He's not your son for you to be so concerned. Why do you care about him so much? It's absurd and laughable. I hit his face, not his head. The blindness is an unfortunate aftermath of the fight. Not my fault. Evelyn's attitude was firm and direct as she pulled at me. I did not want to physically engage with a woman, so I just frowned and pushed her away. Evelyn, you have no right to force me to do anything. Evelyn's expression suddenly changed. Lucas, do you really want me to speak harshly? If back then you hadn't forgotten to bring the stuff and asked him to go back for it, he wouldn't have had the accident and ended up disabled like now. Today you went crazy for no reason, and because of the beating he can't see. Aren't you going to take responsibility? She looked at me with accusatory eyes full of resentment. I suppressed the annoyance inside me and mocked Evelyn sarcastically. I hope you haven't forgotten that he hit me first. He was crazy and I never asked him to go. Why didn't you ask him why he insisted on going that day? Why, after a car accident, did he rush to get his car serviced instead of investigating it? Because he orchestrated everything. Evelyn, if you love him that much, I'll free you from this. Don't involve me anymore. You both are utterly disgusting. Evelyn's face turned extremely angry, and she clenched her fist, yelling, Enough! Adrian and I are not fools. How could he do such a ridiculous thing? Are you just making up lies to avoid responsibility? Believe it or not, it's up to you. I replied. I called a nurse and reported that someone was harassing a patient. Ignoring Evelyn's grim face, another nurse came over and assured her that there was nothing seriously wrong with Adrian. His vision was returning. Evelyn visibly relaxed, and as she turned to leave, I grabbed her arm, reminding her of our 9 a.m. appointment at the Civil Affairs office. I'm serious, we've known each other for a long time, and I no longer want to argue over trivial matters, I said. Evelyn's expression softened. I'm sorry for overreacting earlier. Those angry words meant nothing. I only regard him as a patient, nothing more. Don't misunderstand. It's still you I love the most. Despite this, she would not agree to a divorce. Shortly after she left, Elaine returned, regretting her prolonged search for hot water. I'm not used to the hospital, and then I got lost. The water might have cooled down by now. Don't worry, she said, handing me the water herself. This has been quite messy. I thanked her, and then the room fell silent. I felt embarrassed even as I drank the water, always looking outside. She must have noticed, so she said she would leave first. But before going, she tossed a business card on the bed. This is the card of lawyer Henry. You might have heard of him. He's very competent. As long as it's a divorce case, he'll handle it. Never lost a case. I was somewhat taken aback. She had truly been a great help. As I watched her leaving, I shouted a thank you. It felt awkward to call her Miss since she was only 3 years older than me. As I paused, she turned back, smiled playfully, and joked, "Do I look that old?" Her smile warmed the room and my ears turned red. I always felt she was teasing me. Then I also left, but just as I reached the door, I saw the hot water bottle. As I boarded the bus, I remembered she hadn't brought anything with her. Had she run out to the parking lot just to get that business card? Perhaps I was overthinking it. How could someone like her be interested in me? Evelyn continued to call me, even finding my rental place to apologize. She gently pulled at my coat, trying to charm me. Don't be so cold. I've arranged for a doctor abroad and will send Adrian away. I remained indifferent and coldly replied, Evelyn, I don't love you anymore. If there are any issues in the future, please contact my lawyer. That night, Adrian sent me some photos. How do you like these pictures? Want to see more videos soon? She'll be mine. I responded bluntly, what nonsense are you talking about? Don't you have any shame? That's none of my business. When Evelyn approached me again, she was ready to divorce but had one condition, that I attend a family meeting with her family, who really liked me. She wanted to discuss the divorce after this family meeting. I reluctantly agreed to the family gathering. The B family was large, and everyone gathered in a perfect setup, praising the young couple standing together. What a match of talent and beauty! It seemed that Evelyn had not told her family about our impending divorce. As I looked around, wasn't that Elaine? It was indeed her, but why was she here? I thought she would never involve herself in these matters. Quietly, that's Elaine. She and Evelyn aren't on good terms, I overheard someone whisper. I glanced at Elaine just as she looked over at me, and I instinctively bowed my head in greeting. She seemed indifferent and perhaps a bit angry. Maybe it wasn't about me. Let's go over there. Both my parents are there, Evelyn said, approaching me with a smile. I tried to return the smile, but just then, Adrian ran over and took her hand, his action smooth and natural. Finally found you. Do you know how panicked I was when I couldn't find you? He looked frightened and helpless. I couldn't believe he also came. Was this family gathering of the B family supposed to include him? Evelyn quickly pulled her hand away and tried to explain to me. Don't misunderstand. He's here because of me. No need to explain, we'll be divorced soon anyway. I cut her off. Evelyn slightly opened her mouth, her face stiffening. Adrian flashed a smile and took a piece of cake for me. I was about to refuse but noticed Elaine sitting alone in a corner, looking quite bored and sullen. I took the cake and passed it to Elaine. After all, she had taken me to the hospital last time, and I hadn't properly thanked her yet. A waiter accidentally spilled wine on me. He quickly apologized. His voice sounded familiar, but I couldn't place where I had heard it. I went to the restroom to clean up, and as I did, I overheard a conversation. Suddenly it clicked. They were the ones who had killed me in my previous life. My fists clenched. They really dared to come here and commit evil deeds on B family grounds. This time I would settle both old and new scores. They were unarmed, easy as pie compared to last time. If not for their cowardly acts, I wouldn't have been beaten to death. When I stepped out, I saw Elaine leaning against the wall. I ran to her and lifted her up. She was trying to tell me the cake was problematic and to be careful. Her voice was weak, warning me of the danger, but compared to her, I was more frightened. Carry me into a room, she instructed as I searched for a pill to give her. Looking at her weakened state, she took the pill and smiled. Why do I feel like you're a bit disappointed? Disappointed it wasn't the poison you expected? Surprised by her joke, I replied. Go take a bath, you're dirty. I looked down and saw my own body was indeed filthy. After bathing and stepping out in a bathrobe, my hair half dry, I noticed she had also changed clothes. The atmosphere turned a bit awkward. Did you settle things with Evelyn? She asked. I shook my head, then recounted the recent events. I wasn't sure if I had missed any details, but a smile briefly crossed her face, improving her mood significantly. I've noticed those men might have escaped, I said again, trying to lighten the mood. Elaine smiled. Where could they possibly run off to? It was undeniable. Elaine was incredibly charming. Her appearance, words, and actions all exuded an irresistible allure. As we conversed, the noise from outside filtered in along with chaotic footsteps. Just before they burst in, I had carried Elaine into the bathroom, feeling a bit scared. Suddenly, the door was kicked open with a loud bang. Evelyn and Adrian burst in, followed by friends and family. At that moment, I was only in a bathrobe with my hair still wet and a scratch visible on my neck. Misunderstandings were inevitable as the crowd started whispering. How could he do such a thing, especially right here on family grounds? It looked utterly insane and quickly became a hot topic of gossip. They looked at me with suspicion and disgust, then at Evelyn, who was furious. She stormed over and slapped me hard, making my face turn to one side. Evelyn gritted her teeth and demanded, "Who is that woman? Who is she?" Her eyes were bloodshot, and it seemed she wanted to strangle me right there. At that moment, Elaine stepped forward and defended me. I was stunned as the crowd gasped. Is that Elaine? She approached Evelyn with a cold expression and pushed her away. Are you trying to commit murder? That's illegal. Though her voice was calm, it was clear she was angry. I didn't expect her to step out and defend me in such chaos. Evelyn's eyes were red with rage as she smoothed her clothes and mocked Elaine venomously. What relationship do you have with him that you dare seduce him? How can you stoop so low? Furious, I wanted to slap Evelyn myself, but Elaine beat me to it. The first slap was to calm her down, the second was to make her realize the consequences of slandering others, and the third was because she dared to disrespect an elder, openly challenging me. I was in awe. Elaine was truly fierce. Evelyn was left staggering as friends and family nearby looked on in disbelief, none daring to speak after the slaps. Elaine dusted off her hands and looked at me as if to say she had avenged me. Something about her action touched my heart. Evelyn, trying to regain composure, asked me if I was okay. Adrian, who had been frozen in fear until now, came to comfort her. Ignoring him, Evelyn glared fiercely at Elaine, tears turning into a torrent. Why would you seduce him? Don't you know how much I love him? Can't you see I can't live without him? She cried, the pain evident in her eyes, but to me it seemed more revolting than genuine. You don't need to pretend to love him, Elaine said coldly. You don't have to act anymore, Evelyn. Do you think I and the family are fools? You've been deceiving everyone, your own parents, and fawning over that man blindly. When Adrian heard her, his face turned pale with shame. Elaine then addressed the crowd. Look carefully at the marks on his neck. Could they have been made by a woman? These scars are from fighting off those who conspired against him, and I was drugged by a poisoned cake provided by this man. Adrian, hearing the mention of the cake, looked even more terrified. I have proof, I declared loudly, pulling out my mobile phone. Adrian lunged to grab it, but Evelyn held his arm tightly. What are you doing, Adrian? I turned on my phone in the restroom and played a short video I had recorded secretly. In the video, Adrian instructed his accomplice to make Lucas a target and dispose of him if things went south. No need to panic, he said. With a car, just make it look like an accident and it'll all be over. Apparently, those men, despite being beaten by me, still wanted their money and told Adrian that I was in a room with a woman. They planned to catch me in a compromising situation so Evelyn would give up on me. As the video ended, the room fell into a deadly silence. Adrian's face paled and Evelyn, enraged, pushed him away harshly before slapping him. I admit we wronged you before, but we've compensated you over the years. Why are you so cruel, wanting to harm Lucas and even kill him? Are you even human, Adrian? Adrian knocked over a vase in anger and shouted, I am human too, with a heart. I just wanted you to love me as you love him, but your heart only has room for him. Every time we kiss, you don't look at me. I know you don't want to see me. We grew up together. Why do you love him? Is it just because you went to the same university? His words could only express his pain, and everyone's face showed despair. They realized that the one weeping pitifully was actually the schemer. He wanted to be Evelyn's husband and harm Lucas. Despicable. She even kissed him, destroying another family as she cried like a spiteful woman. I glanced at them both. Now was the time to make our divorce public, clear to everyone. Elaine then spoke up. The police have caught those men. I looked at her in surprise. I hadn't even noticed when she had called the police. Despite the chaos, because they were injured and hiding, they were stopped directly by the security staff. I laughed lightly. Adrian, you're so foolish. Those you hired are equally stupid. They're just a group of thugs. Hearing this, Adrian panicked, and just as he tried to flee, I grabbed him and handed him over to the police. They confessed that Adrian was the mastermind. As the police took him away, he clung to Evelyn, yelling, I did all this to be with you, Evelyn. She shoved him away with a look of disgust. You'll surely save me, won't you? His face looked strange as he said this. After the others left, Evelyn tried to reconcile with me. I'm sorry. Sorry, I didn't know he was like that. I was also deceived by him. I ignored her words and coldly said, Evelyn, let's get a divorce. I don't feel anything for you anymore. I'm really fed up. You still try to hold on. Eventually, we moved to litigation. During this time, I was busy with my piano performances. Sometimes my police friend would tell me about Adrian, who kept claiming he was a victim, saying that the car accident was just a play to make Evelyn and me feel guilty, not expecting that he would ruin his own hands. Of course, Evelyn knew this, which only made her despise Adrian more. My friend also said Adrian kept trying to contact Evelyn for a talk, but she didn't want to meet him. After a performance, it was Elaine who came to pick me up. She brought me a bouquet of flowers to congratulate me. You seem busy with your career, she remarked, glancing at me through the rearview mirror. I nodded and opened up about my belief that only a career is an eternal pursuit. She chuckled after hearing this. I used to think that too. That's why I went abroad to start a business while still very young. Did your company fail? I recalled what Evelyn had said before and couldn't help asking. Have you ever heard of Bury? Of course, it's a high-end brand. This suit is also from that brand. I actually founded it. I only knew that the COO of Bell Luxury was quite mysterious, rumored to be a man. Surprised, she added. Why would I still care about the family's assets? Then sorry, who told you I was after their assets? I'm here to find someone. After many years abroad, I realized that not only a career is eternal, emotions are too. She then stopped the car and looked at me intensely, making my ears turn red. I've arrived. Thank you for the ride and your words. After I got out, her laughter followed me, making me feel slightly embarrassed. Just as I reached home, I saw Evelyn, and my face instantly darkened, wanting to ignore her. Unexpectedly, she grabbed my hand and asked, "Who had sent the flowers?" I scoffed. "What does it matter to you?" Her face showed discontent as she spoke of having a recurring dream where Adrian furiously beat me. But I endured it. On her birthday, I had carefully prepared a dinner, but she didn't return because he said he was afraid of the dark, and I was beaten to death by the men he hired. Tears fell as she gently tugged at my shirt, apologizing. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I don't know if that dream is real, but every time I wake up, my heart aches unbearably. I know you don't want to hear what I have to say right now. I cut her off, holding the bouquet tightly. All those things are real. Do you think a person who died because of those events would forgive you? Hearing my confirmation, she collapsed, crying and apologizing continuously. Sorry is the most worthless word in the world. I coldly pushed her away. As I was about to enter, she promised she would divorce me, then disappeared as if she had never existed. When I heard from her, she had directly stabbed Adrian. He had used his supposed blindness as an excuse to get to the hospital where Evelyn sneaked in and killed him. A friend detailed to me how Evelyn had told Adrian that as long as he could get out of jail, she had a way to save him. Adrian had sent those damning photos to his brother abroad initially as leverage to threaten Evelyn in the future, not expecting that it would really come to him being killed. Evelyn had long despised Adrian and also wanted to cover up, so she killed him. His family was nearing bankruptcy. That was why he clung to Evelyn, likely genuinely liking her. Recently, Elaine often visited me, sometimes bringing gifts. That day we had a drink together. You wouldn't like me, would you? I joked. She nodded directly. Yes, I like you. Should we give it a try? Then we let things happen naturally until we decided to marry. Elaine told me that she had actually liked me since childhood when we were both kidnapped, but we had managed to escape when the kidnappers, I wasn't looking, but they caught up with us. I tried to protect her. I hid my head on a rock, and she told me, while clinging to my arms, that I had amnesia and couldn't remember her or the event. They said it was something bad, so I wanted to forget it. She thought the same and thus went abroad. But she realized later that she couldn't forget me. As she said this, she looked up and kissed me. Why do your lips taste so bitter? I love you, she said. I was stunned for a moment, then kissed her back more passionately. Both of us were chasing an eternal career, and now we had found eternal love together.